Forward to today to our area. What the goal of this is really to have our police kind of share with you what their experiences, what activity has occurred here in Fairmont. Every week we provide all of you in the council, and although sometimes we run a little bit behind, but usually every week we provide you a fairly detailed report of a lot of our police activity. And I've had just about all of you at one point or another comment about the types of activities that our officers encounter on a daily basis. And unfortunately, quite a bit of that does involve the work we have a task force that deals with drugs, the Three Rivers Drug Task Force. Our patrol officers are constantly responding to a variety of calls, but they do involve drug usage, some drug trafficking. We've had some of that, not extensively. I don't want to state that it's a gigantic problem, but it is an issue that our officers have been responding to. So we wanted to share a little bit of what their experiences have been, what our responses have been. Now our role as the local government, as I've just stated, is really to respond to calls for service, for police, and certainly our fire response to emergency medical and other medically related issues. Of course, the Marion County Rescue Squad provides the transport. They respond as well. But both the Rescue Squad and our fire department are now providing, when it comes to any types of drug overdoses, they do have the ability to provide the immediate relief, or, and I don't the exact terminology, but to assist somebody who may have just overdosed for a variety of reasons. So, but we're also trying to be very proactive, and that is to provide education, to provide training, to partner with a variety of issues, and the chief has been very active in partnering with various organizations, institutions to, again, address the issue and try to figure out solutions. The problem is not going to go away. It is a problem that unfortunately will continue. We, at some point, just about all of us will need some sort of medical attention, health. Hopefully it does not involve receiving a prescription, but the reality is that it can happen to anyone. Drug abuse, drug issues really don't know race or color, religion, or socioeconomic status. It can impact anyone at any time, and that's just the reality. What we can do is try to continue to stay proactive, try to educate, obviously, our residents, try to work with the healthcare industry, work with our legislators at both the state and the federal level, or at the county level. It will take every single one of us to begin to reduce the incidence of either prescription drug abuse or illicit drug use or anything else that is harmful that can be harmful to any one of us. So just wanted to give you a little bit of a prelude, explain a little bit of my background and experience on the situation. But I feel completely 100% confident in the work that our police and our fire personnel, they have received considerable training. We will continue to ensure that they do receive training, that they have the resources necessary to address this issue and to provide the response. And ultimately, we will continue to collaborate and partner with just about every organization, every agency out there.
There's a bunch of statistics, but I just want to make sure that you're aware with where we were, where we are now, what our limitations are, and to get your input on the drug house ordinance and what you've had a chance to look at after reviewing it. So the first page, as we flip through the packet, for 2017, our stats, we had an average of 31 officers throughout the year that handled 22,604 individual calls. Of those, we responded 43,986 times. That means if there's 2 officers, 3 officers, however many officers go to a call, that's how many times we were running back and forth across the city. Those 30 officers made 1,643 arrests, 852 citations. We actually wrote reports on 2,600 plus crimes. We checked businesses and residences 3,800 times. That's actually physically getting out, writing it down, sliding it under the door. 1,600 traffic stops that weren't related to drug investigations or anything else. That's proactive enforcement. 409 prisoner transports to regional jail. It's over 42,000 miles traveled. And these stats are at the low end of that. So you can see my frustration whenever you say just put an officer out to watch for people littering, or just watch this house. You can make arrests all day long. Sit on this street. You can watch traffic. We're very, very limited with those types of numbers and the amount of officers that we've had. We've hired 10 officers so far this year. We still need to hire 4 more. That's 14 officers within 1 year. That's over a quarter of our department. Over half our department's going to have less than 3 years, and I think they do now. So we're dealing with a young department. It's very stressful for everybody out there. They're worked to the bone, and the opioid and the drug epidemic is just, it's exacerbated a problem. We're working with less people than we did in 2013. I did a 5-year, that's how far back I went, that I felt that we had reliable statistics where everything was being entered in the computer and we were generating our own police reports and things like that. So a lot of the stats that you'll get are just comparing 2013 to present day in 2017. Some of the stats, you can see a progression. The first section that you have is the basically unattended deaths, overdoses, things like that. Just because somebody overdoses doesn't mean they're necessarily die. It means we provided a response. They had to go to the hospital. They had to get Narcan. They had to take, we had to do something like that. The 2013 stats may be off because a lot of our unattended deaths, a lot of our injured people weren't properly documented. As 2015 came around and we started to see that there was an epidemic going around, we tried to make more accurate numbers. But just looking at the total numbers that are involved there, we're looking at about 29 total, unattended deaths, missing people, deceased, injured, overdosed people. As you flip through to 2018, we already have exceeded that number, and we're not even halfway through the year. And most of those you'll see are overdoses and unattended deaths. And a lot of those unattended deaths are because of some type of alcohol consumption, drug consumption, something like that, an unattended overdose or prescription medication type of overdose, that sort of thing. Then we go into our arrests. You can see in 2013, these are all drug arrests. These are everything from misdemeanor simple possession arrests to third offense drug dealing, life in prison arrests. So 2013, we had 53 total drug arrests. Of those, 45 were misdemeanors, 8 felonies. 2013, if you look at it, most of our charges were misdemeanor possession of marijuana charges. A lot of those charges where you see arrests are cleared by arrest by citation. That means that we bring the person in, we give them a citation, we process them, they're released. That doesn't mean that they go to jail. We don't put people in prison for life for dime bags or anything like that, regardless of what people say on social media. Marijuana has always been handled as a lower level type of offense, and it has been cleared by citation in most cases. You can see that our drug task force wasn't very busy that year. That was because, if anybody remembers, we had Operation Blue Haze that was in operation in Bellevue, and they were doing undercover operations as part of the federal task force and making arrests on that. So it's unusually low, the arrest numbers on that. You go to the age range of the people that were getting arrested because of the simple possession of marijuana. You can see that it was a younger age, and it basically progressed up through older age. Most of our arrests, over probably only 15% of the arrests were females in 2013. Go to 2016, flip through that. We had almost 100 arrests. About half of them were felonies. And you'll see that we started to charge simple possession through municipal court. That's because municipal charges were opened up to where we could actually make city charges for misdemeanor possession. That's misdemeanor possession of everything from marijuana to meth to synthetic marijuana, heroin, things like that. That's personal use, that's not dealers or anything like that. Sometimes we will charge through the state, and you'll see a breakdown on that third page for 2016 that shows all the different categories of arrests in 2016. But I'll gloss over that, just touching on the fact that you'll see that Three Rivers Drug Task Force is more involved. that you'll start to see a wider age range where older people are starting to get involved in the arrests, and the women, females, are taking up more percentage of the arrests. So 2017, 159 drug arrests. Simple possession is at the top. You'll see again 44 felony arrests, 110 misdemeanor arrests, and now we're to this year. Up to this date, we've made 96 arrests. That's more than we made all year 2013. It's almost what we made 2016. And then you'll see that the age groups are starting to get it skewed a little bit. You have an older segment of the population that's getting involved in more opioids. We've had a definite, you used to be able to target a certain drug that was coming in or a certain type of substance that somebody was on. Basically, it's across the board now, whether it's heroin, meth, synthetic. People are doing whatever they can get their hands on. Also, you'll see a mix of drugs getting trafficked in. It's not just people bringing in marijuana from a certain area. It's bringing in the marijuana, the meth, and the heroin all together. So they go side by side. You know, people get up in arms nowadays talking about marijuana arrests, and I understand that, the decriminalization going on and stuff like that. But you can't separate the fact that marijuana is being trafficked with hard drugs. Marijuana is getting carried by people with hard drugs. We can make a marijuana arrest whenever somebody's got a crack pipe in their pocket. We can't charge them with paraphernalia for having a crack pipe, but it only applies to marijuana. That's why the health department can get away with doing the needle exchanges and things like that. The needles aren't considered paraphernalia. The only thing considered paraphernalia is marijuana. But then just more stats, and you can see the progression through what we were arresting people for in 2013. Most of our arrests were driving suspended, things like that. You have to go all the way down about 12, 13 charges before you get into where marijuana, simple possession was the main crime. You go to 2018 and look at the stats, you got a lot of people not paying fines. That's because people aren't taking care of themselves. Simple possession is at the top of that list. Most of those simple possessions are not for marijuana, they're for hard drugs, they're for synthetic, they're for meth, they're for heroin. But you can just see the crimes change. And, you know, the crimes that are associated with drug use aren't just the drug use or the possession or the trafficking. It's everything from property crimes to person-on-person crimes. To not taking care of yourself. You get caught with capias because you're blowing your money paying your dealer instead of taking care of yourself. So everything's linked together with the drug epidemic that we have now.
Problem. So that's kind of the information that I provided to all of you, that Kevin did the research, and kind of the basis, the impetus, or the main basis for our proposed drug house ordinance that we seek your guidance, and I'm looking for your guidance as to move forward with, and we can certainly.
I have the draft ordinance that, again,
what we're looking to present to in front of council. If we proceed, we would look to introduce this at the June 26th City Council meeting. There would be a public hearing. Janet, if I'm correct, it would be July the 10th. Would be the public hearing for this ordinance. It would then, if adopted by council, would take effect 30 days after that, or approximately August the 9th, August 9th or 10th. So I did provide a copy of this to all of you, and again, we can go over, but it's pretty straightforward that we would add an article to prescribe drug and gang houses, houses of prostitution, other disorderly houses could require such abatement processes as a night watchman, or I guess night watch woman as well, it doesn't have to be a man, for certain vacant or open structures, prohibit recklessly permitting the physical condition or facilities of residential real estate from becoming or remaining in any condition which endangers the health or safety of any person. So it's really, as other cities have done, it gives us the tool, the process to identify properties. Now, they have to have had at least 2.
That was my question.
Next.
Is that different from the Martinsburg ordinance?
Here's an example of an actual, this is an actual order of abatement from the city of Martinsburg issued by the judge, Chief Maurice Richards, appearing before the undersigned magistrate, etc., presenting a sworn complaint that the defendant leased the subject property to the individual reference. Then it goes on to say what happened on 20th of July. An invitee of said tenant used the subject for purposes conducting certain illegal activity, prostitution, gambling, possession, storage, delivery, trafficking, and controlled substances, whereas on the same day, Martinsburg police officers executed a search warrant recovering quantities of crack and marijuana, whereas, etc., invitee participated in the illegal activities, etc. The defendant has operated the subject property in violation of their drug and gang houses ordinance, house of prostitution, other disorderly. It is therefore ordered in a judge that the defendant is ordered to abate the conditions. Now, here's the abatement. The judge ordered that the defendant terminate the occupancy of said individual within 30 days. So this is in essence an order of abatement to evict the person that was participating or allowed the illegal activity that appeared to include prostitution, gambling, drug trafficking. So that's one example of what could happen.
Can that even be done within 30 days within the system? I mean, one time I tried to evict a tenant and I was given all these rules of...
That was in civil court.
Well, I think the eviction process has to go through civil court. I don't think that Judge Julian has the ability to evict somebody. What this abatement process would be he would be directing the property owner to evict the tenant. We would have to schedule that a status conference at some point in the future, a status hearing in the future with sufficient time to give the property owner sufficient time to provide for the eviction.
So the property owner is given the 30 days in this case to institute it,
Right.
but whether the person's out or not, it doesn't have to happen within 30 days, it sounds like.
Obviously,
If it's tied up in the
they go through-
system.
If they went through the summary eviction proceeding that's in magistrate court, or the full-blown eviction proceeding in magistrate court, the process of eviction would not be in municipal court. We don't have jurisdiction over that. That would have to take place in magistrate court.
Can
The statutory process.
now can the owner of the property delay the whole process by saying that you haven't found these people guilty, they haven't gone to court? Does that have any play in this?
Well, in order to satisfy my idea of due process, I modified the process that Martinsburg had outlined in their ordinance. So what I contemplated was that the chief of police would issue basically what would be I called it something other than an order of abatement. I called it a notice of determination of a violation. So he would issue that, and then what I contemplated was that Anthony, well, the municipal judge here would have a confirmatory hearing, and the person to whom that order was issued would then have the opportunity of notice and the right to have a hearing. Martinsburg doesn't have any of that, and that clearly, in my opinion, is unconstitutional, because the Constitution at a minimum requires that a person be entitled to notice and the right to be heard. So I formulated in our ordinance the process of notice and the right to be heard before you could implement the remedies that the chief had dictated to you as part of the abatement process. So it would be confirmed by a judicial officer. And then the person would obviously, under the general processes that are dictated that are at city court, they have the right to appeal to circuit court any order that Anthony issues. So obviously they have the ability to delay it. And if they appeal it to circuit court, they have then, it delays it indefinitely, basically. So we can have a hearing before one of the circuit judges.
Would it make sense then, since you're trying to get the property owners involved and it's a city ordinance, to put together a list of helpful steps like eviction for dummies or something like that, instead of each property owner having to struggle to figure out what needs done and is it okay, or go to law school, we have some information put together as to work within the system, that you need to do this, and it's followed by this. I mean, why couldn't you make something seamless?
Basically, if they,
I have a problem, because
Well, you're a lawyer.
these people are gonna be criminal defendants, and for the city, who is adverse to them, to be providing them with legal information is a conflict. So for me to develop and provide them with the remedy when they are adverse to the city's interest and adverse to my position, then that puts me in a position of giving advice to a criminal defendant. It would be no different than me telling a guy who got arrested by Steve's guys for DUI what he needs to do.
So you're saying the property owner becomes the defendant in your eyes?
Yeah, right. He's a criminal
Because he rented to somebody that ended up doing something? And you've made them into a defendant?
No, it isn't. They become, if they get an order of abatement and they don't do what the order of abatement says after the confirmatory hearing,
there's the
then
big
they are
if.
subject to a
Well,
full
what I'm-
That's the if.
Yeah, but what I'm talking about is in order to do what they should do in the process.
I can't provide them with legal information. People call all the time at the city and say, can you give me legal advice? I got arrested for speeding. Can you give me legal advice? The guy next door to me put a fence on my property, and I keep telling them, I am not your attorney, I represent the city, I don't give people legal advice who are calling the city looking for it. I can't give criminal defendants legal advice, and I couldn't give the landlord or the person to whom the order of abatement was issued legal advice.
I mean, when you're putting together, when you go to the building inspector, they give you things that show you how to work within the system and the rules.
Right,
It's a
but,
simple process until they fail to comply with it.
yeah, this is for failing
Right.
to comply
Exactly.
with, I would even call it
With the
sometimes common
abatement,
sense.
with the order to abate.
Right. Well, in this case, they failed to comply because it is not allowed to have prostitution on your property. It's a crime.
and as long as they take a step to do the abatement that the judge orders, there is no penalty.
Right.
So they're told what to do following the abatement. And the other safeguard built into it is that not every police officer applies for abatement. It has to go through me. I have to present it to a judge, and the judge orders the notice and summons, and then he shows up, and then he's still not guilty. The judge tells him what he can do to improve, and it's a case-by-case thing.
Would that get increased on, like, say, a subsequent offense? They complied, they paid their $500, so the next time that happens, is it still only $500?
It can only be $500 because that's the maximum jurisdiction of the city court. You can't go above $500.
So, and Mr. Sansalone, correct me if I'm wrong, as you might know, I'm a landlord also. So I differentiate between the words terminated and eviction as separate processes. If you tell me to terminate somebody, I issue them that lease termination. At the end of that 30 days, I go to the court and file for wrongful occupation, whereas the eviction process starts there. Is that correct?
I'm not a landlord and I haven't researched that.
He's not-
Okay.
He's not going to tell you.
Okay.
I'll defer to you.
That's fine. No,
He's not going to tell you.
it was
wouldn't even
just,
have to get to the.
it was just open to his exception there, but as a landlord, I've done that in Mon and Marion counties, that's the way it works.
It wouldn't even have to be an eviction. An abatement could be as simple as
Sure it
making a
is.
person who's an offender in your rental sign a lease. It could be as simple as knowing that there's a problem and doing a check of your residence or the scheduled
It's
check.
kind of, if we have, as we've been doing for the last couple of, well, many years, but sort of stepped up in the last couple of years, dealing with blighted properties. Each one is different. When they come before Judge Julian, it might be you need to tear down the house. It might be you need to fix the windows. It might be you need to mow the lawn because it's 3 feet high. I mean, sort of what they will encounter. Each one could potentially be very unique.
What is the timeline? What is the timeline on getting that?
Based on general information.
My question, I'm sorry, Frank, go ahead.
What is that timeline from the time the chief says they've done this wrong on getting them out of the house or their occupancy?
We don't do that, sir.
Very.
So that would go to the judge. And like now, you're talking about the liens on the property that we've had in the past with the laws we have. They can be delayed and delayed and delayed. Is that going to be a problem with this? where they can go to the judge and it'll be delayed. Well, wait a minute, we're going to give them 30 days, we're going to give them 60 days. Now,
Well, this is independent of the criminal charge, though. This is a different issue altogether, isn't it?
What I could do, is there is a section in here where I could determine that there was that it was a nuisance property and actually do a criminal order without doing the process of abatement.
Is that, regardless of this issue of the code enforcement thing, you pretty happy with this, the way it's written?
Yes, sir.
I have a question. And I may be way off base here, but I'm a property owner. I rented in good faith. He's come to me with decent references, and all at once I find out that he's showed cocaine out of this. Now it's my responsibility to get rid of him. So trying to do this, I go to him and I say, I would like for you to have your fingerprints taken or something else to substantiate. And he looks at me and says, no. I mean, what goes after that?
And not necessarily in every case, not every time that there's an instance of somebody overdosing in a home or getting caught dealing drugs out of a rental or selling out of a hotel room. Not all of those are preventable, and you can't foresee the future, and there are honest people that are going to have pieces of crap renting off of them, and it doesn't necessarily rise to the level where I would think that it would need abatement from a judge. They're trying to do the right thing. A person made a mistake in their home, and you can chalk it up to that. But if they're not doing anything, if they're living in Florida, they've never checked on their house, they've got some guy working under the table, watching, going around collecting the rent for them, that's a problem. If somebody is going out there and they're getting their rental inspection every 2 years and they're watching over their property and they're making sure everything, those aren't the people that we're going after. We're going after the absentee people, the ones that don't care, the ones that aren't trying to make improvements and things like that. Just because somebody gets caught dealing drugs out of a house doesn't mean that we're automatically going to go after the property owner.
So how do you get a hold of the guy in Florida?
How do we get a hold of
Reach out
him?
and get the landowner.
Usually
Robin knows
something
it.
catastrophic happens and then they want to.
Robin knows it.
And they show up.
But the reality, the problem is stemming even beyond, I mean, a lot of with the drug cartels out of Mexico, it's just a coincidence that's where I was born. That's all it is, but I have done research on the cartels. I'm familiar with a lot of what's happened. I've spoken to Mexican government officials in my prior place of employment because of just commonalities that we had. It's an issue that's it's a federal, it's a state, it's at every level. There are solutions out there. They're very difficult. It's more than just a wall. I will say that it's more than just building a wall. It's significantly more than that. It's economic, it's social, it's educational. Until we kind of grasp our arms around that, and that has to begin at the federal level, we will continue to see what is happening. I have 3 physicians in my immediate family. I have 2 physicians who prescribing a medication was the last thing they were going to do. I had one who pretty much that was one of the first things that they did. So we've all had or encountered or heard of physicians who let's prescribe it, and that's part of it. We know there are many, many variables related to this. It is great to be in a city where we have had the issues, and hopefully they will be reduced, but we're doing everything that we can, and by we, Chief Shine and the staff and the task forces, and by the way, we're not the only task force. Just a quick research, I didn't email this to you, but just in the Northern District of West Virginia, out of the U.S. Attorney's Office, there are 9 task forces that are addressing violent crime and drugs and drug trafficking from the Ohio, all around our state. So we're not the only ones here in Fairmont that is addressing this issue, clearly, as everybody is aware. But we're at the cusp right now where really the conversations now are going in a much higher level, because if you read just in the news the last month, multiple articles about just forums and conversations similar to what we're having today. So we will continue having these and seeing where we go with the drug house ordinance, but I just wanted to interject a little bit about that.
Can I comment a little bit more on rental properties in particular and the environments that I work in? The landlord is the responsible party, and they are responsible for having a lease of any kind that spells out the things that we're talking about here as to when you can have your lease terminated. You can also have a clause in your lease where you, the head of household, the primary renter, you're responsible for the conduct of your guests and visitors. So even if you're having friends over and you're the leaser, then you're still responsible for your friends and their drug habits while they're on your property, and that'll consequently result in the landlord's lap too. So having that lease that describes these issues is a very important tool for the landlords, including the background checks and even a tenant selection plan that says if I find these discrepancies on your background check, we will not be renting to you. But as far as promulgating such information, we do have a rental property registry through the code office that we might develop an information packet recommending these items to a landlord that registers their rental property with us.
And it appears like, to summarize this, if I get it correctly now, that we're just trying to put an ordinance in place to deal with people that try to ignore when the authorities say we keep going back to this place, we keep going back to this, and it gives them leverage to get them out. Or people that ignore all the notices. It gives you another layer of authority legally to deal with the situation that, the people that, if you say, I need to get rid of somebody and I take those steps, none of this really matters because it's all going to work its way out. But for people that live out of state, or, well, even if they live in state, that just try to ignore you, and especially that one residence where you said it's owner occupied, it gives you some clout to do something about it other than to keep spinning your wheels the way you've been. Is that pretty much summarize what we're trying to do?
Care about their property, care about the area that
Okay.
they're out of.
Well, that makes
You just
sense.
have few that are trying
That
to
makes
get the
sense.
maximum profit out of putting the lease in and really don't care what happens as long as they
Yeah.
get a couple $100.
You could call it the incentive to be a good citizen ordinance.
Yeah.
Back to this issue with the, what the chief wants in there, dealing with the code enforcement and what code enforcement doesn't want in there. Why don't you explain that to us so we can be the deciders of whether we want it in there or not? Because this thing, to me, sounds like this is a tool to fight crime, not to be easier on code enforcement. So please explain that to us.
Because it requires a petition of a judge and things like that, and if you read the section 54702 that might require some additional debate, it talks about any persons that own, maintain, operate, collect rent for vacant and open buildings. So you're already dealing with open and vacant buildings, which would require some type of inspection. If it's a rental property and it hasn't been properly approved for rental, it would already have some sort of condemnation to where people would have to vacate and it wouldn't be approved for rental. So you have the vacant registry list, you have the rental registry that you would have to be on. You're talking about abandoned buildings, vacant buildings, boarded up buildings, enclosed vacant buildings, and then it says, unless the building has been secured by methods approved by the city building inspector. If that doesn't call for code enforcement's involvement and assistance in this, I don't know what else does.
Why do they not want it in there? Why?
I think just additional work, but that's.
Well, that's.
Join the club.
Well, I think.
That's Mayor.
I think.
They already do all the property maintenance.
Right.
Enforcement. So all the bad buildings that you guys have been, addressing with ordinances and all of the code notices and all of the rental inspections and all of the vacant property registration, they take care of all of that already. And that's why I put in there that the building inspector was the person who could determine whether it was properly secured, because they know under the property maintenance code what proper.
Then why would
That's what they do.
That's what they're doing.
Is it in there now?
It's in there now, that aspect of it, but I think Steve wants in there more. He wants them to be able to issue the orders
For that violation of 54702, vacant
For a
open
vacant or
buildings,
open
I would like
buildings.
them to have enforcement action to where the building inspector could petition a judge for abatement the same as.
Oh, that's what they don't want to
Just
do.
for that
That's what they
section.
already do with property maintenance, and I didn't want to confuse this ordinance with the property maintenance ordinance, so I separated the enforcement of it, that
Oh.
this is a police issue versus a property maintenance and building.
And then last week, I was told I was responsible for 907 of the city code that deals with excavators. So, I mean, we got a lot of overlap, and it frustrates me a lot that something has to do with
Yeah.
vacant buildings.
I still don't understand which is the best, is this that big a deal?
It's not
Is it-
that, it's,
Is it,
If I can interject, I personally think it's better, because of the building code issues and the property maintenance code, and all of the enforcement that we're doing with property maintenance issues, under the building code, which is the code enforcement and a building code responsibility to keep the two separate, at least temporarily, until we take down all the bad buildings and there's no property maintenance issues any longer, then we can add it in there. But I think it's
We can
better if
further
this one
discuss.
can leave them
what,
separate.
But I agree with Kevin to keep them separated, so to avoid the confusion. But we will certainly provide the assistance whenever they need it, and I've addressed.
it sounds like you're
so
getting,
we'll do a report, we'll get a hold of the building inspector, we'll tell them to send us a form showing where the building was, not, posted by
Secure.
methods approved, and then we'll do.
Well, I think these are not other buildings. I think these are buildings that the police would come across as part of this gang house, drug house, house of prostitution problem.
That's true, but
And
then
so
we will
this
have to call
would
the
be
building inspector out to tell us that it's not.
Whether it's
Yeah.
properly
The
secured.
Martinsburg ordinance said city engineer, and I know John Carson would kind of be involved in, I don't know that he would have the expertise to determine whether it was properly secured, whereas Ken Fletcher, the
Our
building
building
inspector,
inspector can-
has
does.
more knowledge and more information about securing the building than the city engineer would. And maybe in Martinsburg, the city engineer's office is responsible for code enforcement as opposed to having its own department like we do. I thought the more appropriate person would be the city building inspector as opposed to the city engineer.
I'll tell you what.
I changed that aspect. If
That's
you guys
fine.
want me to put city engineer in there,
No, I
I'd
think
rather
the
put
building
city-
inspector is the most appropriate.
what were you gonna say, Steve?
Oh, I was gonna say, I'm salaried, I wonder if Ken is, between 4 PM and 8 AM, I'll call him out. And we'll go look at every vacant building to make sure it's securely approved by.
I will meet them there as well.
There's got to be a way just to communicate it, and
There is.
that it
There
won't
really
be,
is.
it won't be
If it
confusing.
ends up being a problem, we can always go back and modify it.
It happens every year, we'll take care of it.
Okay.
We'll take care
Yeah,
of it.
But the bottom line is, and I asked you once, and you told me once, I want to ask you again, you're, sounds like 95% happy with this.
We'll take care of it all, sir.
You happy with it?
That was,
We passed it, it's going to help you?
But
take
Huh?
I would be happier if we had a form or a means of, a literal form, where the city building inspector certifies this particular structure as secure, and we would be able to maintain a file of some kind. So we'd have that.
That's what we do.
You know?
We already have that.
We'll go from there it all together.
maybe we could have the building inspector to come the next time we talk about
Yes,
this,
yes.
and he and Steve can go a few rounds, and we can hash this thing out.
We have.
My money's on you, too.
All up.
But the idea is, I don't want to see you
Going
do,
with the gun, right?
you know, no need for you to do it all, you just share it with.
That's right.
I would think the code people were sort of hesitant.
You code people need to.
I have seen cases where they've gone out just for grass cutting and really get torn apart. I think maybe they're a little hesitant to be
Well,
policemen.
People are not happy to see them.
That's part of it, but in reality, I mean, they're not out, in this case, they're not gonna be out there alone.
Right.
Okay,
It's a little-
that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm
It's
talking
for
about.
a
keeping
vacant.
it separate.
It's
Supposedly.
supposed to be vacant. If it's not, we take the appropriate
That's the
action.
problem, is if it's not vacant, is the
There'll
problem.
be a jam in the hotel during the day.
So this is something we want to go
Can I
forward
ask you a
with.
question, just, not so much toward this, but you brought up about these conferences you're going to and all. When I travel to see my grandchildren, my one grandson is a therapist for drug users. But what they're developing in New Jersey is these homes that these people that really want to get off of
go
this
there.
stuff. They work with them. They've been in jail. And what has happened, they come out, the judge lets them out after 30 days. They try and get a job. They can't get a job. They can't pay the fine. So then they got a warrant on them because they haven't reappeared. So they come back and arrest them again, put them in for 90 days. They can't get a job. But now what they're doing is they're putting them into these homes where they work with them. They actually pay rent. They work with them, get them jobs. Is there anything in the forums you're going to try and get help for the people that actually want to try and get off these drugs?
There's all kinds of things in the process. As far as halfway homes, I know we've had people look at properties around the city. You may be familiar with that too. But I mean, there's always people looking to coming in the community, starting up those types of things. As far as a specific program where we have a halfway house in the city, I'm not familiar with it.
Well, not now, but they're looking at this now. It's not just a thing, let's put them in jail. You know, they're just not looking at incarceration. They're trying to help some of these.
No, but to tell you the truth, the process is not going to work as long as all we have is an incarceration center and rehab.
That's exactly right.
They have acres and acres and acres of property, and it's always been my push that you build a separate facility where people that go to jail can immediately say that they have a substance abuse problem, remove themselves from the general population, and go to get help. And, you know, whether it's 15 days, 30 days, whatever, the first time, give them a couple of tries in exchange for some type of reduction of sentence or clemency or something like that. But until that happens, I don't know what else to do other than to hold them responsible. Because right now, there's no repercussions. And that's why we're holding the landlords responsible. We're wanting to, because there's no repercussions. As long as they're getting that paycheck, there's no negative other than they have to pay some guy to come in and spruce up the walls before the next problem comes in.
But an example of a type of solution, I received this from Fairmont State, an initiative that they're looking to launch, so it's preliminary, but to promote a culture of health and wellness on their campus, a collegiate recovery program to combat the current crisis. And as it says, West Virginia, a critical juncture, Fairmont State wants to be a leader. They're the right size, but to create, develop, implement, sustain a comprehensive collegiate recovery program to provide life-changing educational opportunities with folks struggling with addiction. So there are currently numerous programs out there, but here's yet another one from right here that are looking to try to implement a program to help and address the education. It's a huge, and the last sentence in the paragraph, we're currently seeking external funding. Partners to achieve this goal are looking for grants, are looking, ways to help fund this program or initiative. So, and there are many out there. Both the state and the federal through housing or the DHHR here in West Virginia, Health and Human Services at the federal level of grants and other opportunities. Now, we're not in the business of providing the solutions to the problem, meaning like a halfway house or these types of programs, but we can certainly provide letters of support, be there, provide whatever assistance they may need. So we're very willing and looking forward to collaborate to partner for something like this. So we'll continue to seek those out and just be responsive and look to do everything that we can to address the issue, because again, this impacts everyone. It's not just everyone in this room, it's really everybody in the city, the county, the state, and the area. Any other questions or comments? So I gather from council then there's some to proceed
We want to move forward
with the ordinance, and we'll do a final review to make sure that we do internally agree with the ordinance as the information as it has been presented. If you have any changes, I will certainly advise the council as to any changes that we make with the ordinance.
That's it. And just with the things we talked about, and I just verified to myself, we do have a West Virginia Code Chapter 37, and it has a lot of input on landlords and tenants.
Like a landlord-tenant code.
Okay, that's it for the work session.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you.
That's